Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to completely shatter a widely accepted historical illusion about the Philippine-American War and uncover a seriously compelling hidden history. Today, we're talking about a story filled with tactical brilliance, local mythology, and some truly agonizing leadership choices. We are diving into the life of Simeon Ola, often known as the last general of the Bicol Resistance. So if you think you know exactly when and how the resistance in the Philippines ended, well, prepare to have your perspective shifted. Let's kick things off with a pretty striking historical discrepancy. Most history books will confidently teach you that General Miguel Malvar was the absolute last Filipino general to surrender to American forces, right? And they date that to April of 1902. But deep in the mountains of the Bicol region, Simeon Ola was leading a fierce resistance that actually fought on until September 25th, 1903. Just think about what that number means. 17. That's an astonishing 17 months that he held out after the supposed official end of the war. For over a year and a half, while the rest of the country was moving on into a whole new era under American rule, Ola and his men were still out there. They were deep in the jungle, absolutely refusing to lay down their arms. So it really makes you wonder, how did one guy manage to sustain a rebellion for so long after everyone else had fallen? Well, let's get into it with Act 1, Seminarian turned rebel, the unlikely ascent. See, Simeon Ola wasn't born a soldier, and he definitely wasn't bred for warfare. Born in September 1865 in Guinabatan, Albay, he was just a middle-class student of philosophy at the Mater Salutis College Seminary. He was actually on a path to the priesthood, spending his days studying theology and religious texts. But when the winds of revolution swept through the archipelago in the late 1890s, he made a massive pivot. He traded in those religious studies to join the Katipunan, the revolutionary society fighting for independence. He literally swapped philosophy for the front line. Now, to build a rebel force from scratch, you basically need two things, right? Weapons and men. And Ola quickly proved to be an absolute master organizer through two brilliant maneuvers. First up, what we could call the priest's arsenal. He covertly acquired firearms by gaining the trust of a sympathetic local parish priest named Father Carlos Cabido. Next came the jailbreak. Ola actually colluded with a local jail warden, Sergeant Lawama, to free 93 prisoners. And guess what? Those freed prisoners instantly swore loyalty and joined his revolutionary ranks. Those cunning organizational skills didn't just get him men and guns. They put him directly in the trenches at Camalaga by 1898. And his natural leadership in the field, it was so undeniable that General Vito Bellarmino officially promoted him to the rank of captain. Moving right along to Act 2, the vanishing guerrilla tactics and myth. In this particular conflict, we're looking at a massive mismatch. The American forces rolled in with devastatingly superior firepower, relying heavily on rifles designed for long-distance engagements. Now, knowing a head-on collision would be absolute suicide, Ozola ingeniously shifted gears to asymmetric warfare. He used the incredibly dense Bicolano forests totally to his advantage. He launched these daring hit-and-run ambushes in towns like Oas, Ligao, and Javalar, and then boom, he'd melt right back into the jungle before the Americans even had a chance to retaliate. His tactical brilliance really peaked in January of 1900. Ola executed a wildly high-stakes ambush that actually resulted in the capture of 3 American soldiers. This was a massive morale boost for the resistance and obviously a huge embarrassment for the occupying forces. For pulling off this daring feat, Ola earned himself a really swift promotion to the rank of major. Now, here's where it gets really fascinating. Because the Americans simply couldn't pin him down or anticipate where he'd strike next, this wild psychology of warfare began to take root. A powerful rumor started spreading, both among his men and his enemies, that Ola possessed an antin-antin. In local mythology, that's a magical amulet believed to grant supernatural abilities. And the specific rumor here? That this amulet literally allowed Simeon Ola to vanish into thin air whenever he was cornered. No way, right? But listen, this mythical status wasn't just some fun campfire story. It became a highly tangible, strategic advantage. This mystique made him a totally larger-than-life figure. The rumors of magic actively intimidated his enemies, and even more importantly, it spurred massive local recruitment in Albay. It was this exact psychological edge that kept his resistance thriving and his men motivated, even while revolutionary leaders everywhere else in the country were throwing in the towel and raising the white flag. Which brings us to Act 3, the agony of surrender, a leader's dilemma. By mid-1903, things had grown incredibly dire. American forces were desperate to put a stop to these embarrassing raids, so they were relentlessly hunting Olala. And while Olala himself remained uncaptured, the cost was just becoming unbearable. The local civilian population was suffering devastating collateral damage from the prolonged conflict. His rebel men were dealing with extreme battle fatigue, and all of this was compounded by a severe, crippling lack of basic supplies.
So the Americans sent peace emissaries to negotiate. And we really have to step into his shoes for a second here. Honor or survival? Like, do you continue a doomed fight for the sake of military honor and the dream of independence, knowing full well it's going to lead to a slaughter? Or do you swallow your pride and surrender to your enemy just to save your people from total annihilation?
Choosing the survival of his people over his own pride, Simeon Ola finally made the heartbreaking decision to lay down his arms. On September 25, 1903, remember, that is 17 full months after Malvar surrendered, Simeon Ola officially surrendered to American Colonel Harry H. Bandholtz at his camp in Guinobatin. And just like that, the Bicol resistance was over. Now for our epilogue, A Leader in Peace, Life After the War. His post-war life gives you absolute whiplash. In November 1903, he was charged with sedition and sentenced to 30 long years in prison. But just a year later, in 1904, the government recognized his immense influence over the Bicolano people. Desperately wanting to maintain regional peace, they actually granted him executive clemency and a full pardon. So he didn't return home as a defeated outcast. He returned as a hero. By 1910, he had entered politics and was elected the mayor of his hometown in Guinobatin, serving multiple terms. Ultimately, he lived a long, full life in peace, passing away in 1952 at the age of 86. Before we wrap up, we have to touch on the final historical debate: general or major? See, history books are actually still torn on his exact title. In his own memoirs, Ola claims he received an official promotion to the rank of general during the war. However, some historical and military records only officially list his highest confirmed rank as major. This creates a really fascinating dispute over what his true official status was in the military hierarchy of the revolution. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Given everything we've just unpacked today, his tactical brilliance in asymmetric warfare, his legendary mythical status that literally inspired thousands, and that astonishing 17-month holdout long after the rest of the country had surrendered, does Simeon Ola truly deserve the title of the last general? Does official paperwork matter more than the reality of the leadership he wielded up in those mountains? Think about how this story might change your view of history, and how sometimes the most fascinating figures are the ones who held out the longest in the shadows. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what you read in those history books.